Hello everyone, this is IKG Productions, and welcome back to Turnabout Podcast. This is one of the last episodes to ever air, episode 18. And with me I have a brand new special guest, which is what I would normally say, although we have a familiar face. Please introduce yourself.
As my old intro goes, hey guys, this is Jay of Jay's Reviews here. Formerly known for video game reviews, but as of late I've been strictly talking about the DC animated universe on my channel. Exhausting work, but then I get told I get to talk about Ace Attorney again. I never get to do that, so here I am.
Excellent. Glad to have you back, Jay. It's now usually, as you all know, I'm trying to have different guests on for every episode. However, I thought it would be appropriate, considering that someone who I had planned couldn't make it, that I would bring back Jay, because one, he's a fellow content creator I've worked with many times in the past, but also because he was originally on episode 2, and back then he hadn't even played Apollo Justice yet. Since then, he's become a absolute seasoned veteran, if I do say so myself.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've played most games that aren't DGS, and I haven't finished Dual Destinies, but other than that, I've played all the games.
Absolutely. So with that said, our topic for today is what I simply call minor character appreciation. A lot of the minor characters in the Ace Attorney series don't have a lot of ties to the overarching plot, even in sometimes the individual cases. For example, Penny Nichols contributes to Turnabout Samurai, but she's not ultimately crucial for Phoenix to save the day. And that's what makes a lot of these minor characters really easy to A, forget about, or B, just not care about. However, I think without their interesting dialogue, the games wouldn't be nearly as interesting. So, what Jay and I did is we took some of at least one of our favorites from each of the games and wrote them down in a list. So, with that said, Jay, you can begin.
All right. Well, since we're going with every game, we'll start with the first game, and this is actually kind of hard to think about, like just actually think, what are my favorite side characters from every game? So in thinking about the first game, I realized Jake Marshall is actually a top pick for me as a standout character. Of course, his design and his name are like really like it's like on the less subtle side of Ace Attorney humor and character design. But that's why I find he just really stands out with a lot of his animations and like that really distinct gun sound effect when he does like the finger point towards the screen. And
yes.
Also, it's surprising that they can make a character who seems really silly, really interesting, because he's the kind of guy who he does have a modest impact on the story, and you just really feel bad for him with the SL9 incident, taking his brother away and him losing his job, basically losing his job. And like the animation where he takes the hat off and like he's like, "Can you look me in the eye," a detective in that case, and say you used all the evidence? Like you really feel it.
Absolutely. I think Jake Marshall really plays to the ethos and pathos that you'll find in Rise from the Ashes, because he's directly tied to, as you were referencing, just the emotional circumstances and losing Neil Marshall during the SL9 incident, which is extremely dark even for Ace Attorney standards.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a shame how it impacted him, and I think while yes, like his name and his outfit, it's definitely like that really crazy weird side of Ace Attorney, like you were saying. It's interesting how, from a writing perspective, it still kind of ties into his very controlled attitude, which leads to excellent lines like the "Can you look me in the eye" line. Because that sounds like something you would hear in a Western classic,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's purposed so well. And also, I'd like to add that, Jake Marshall being a Apollo Justice, DS sprite, not only does he have more detail than your standard PW character, but he's also got that animation to boot.
Yeah, lots of good stuff there. So how about you for PW?
As for me for PW, I also chose something from Rise from the Ashes. It's a character Jay and I have joked about all the time. Mike Meekins.
Yeah.
See his reactions to laugh.
Yeah, I mean, just a spoiler. I frequently contribute lines to the guy on Team Turnabout, so
That's right. So we have Pharaoh is our voice actor on Team Turnabout for Mike Meekins. However, in episode 3, and I've never told this publicly, so this is interesting. He forgot a line, but he was so busy that I just wasn't going to reach him in time when we were finally getting episode 3 rolling. And I was like, Jay, that student you make fun of at school, can you do that voice and just kind of match it? And Jay just filled in that one line, and it was so funny that I was like, well, what if we gave like the forensic officers lines like that? So now anytime we have a forensic officer in like the Ace Attorney Investigations cases, that's Jay's voice. I don't know if you can tell, but that's him.
Right. It was funny. When I started speaking that, I was like, wait, did I give lines to Meekins or not? But I already started the sentence, so I was like, I'm just going to finish it and then hope I'm correct.
Hey,
so glad that I was. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Mike Meekins is really interesting. I guess in all fairness, I should just talk about his PW appearance, considering I selected him for this game.
Right.
So he kind of has that sort of bumbling idiocy that characters like Wendy Oldbag have, where their testimony is not helpful in court, and it's always unhelpful for Phoenix more than, say, Miles Edgeworth or Manfred, the opposing side. The judge often gets the angriest at these characters, which definitely happens a lot to Meekins in Rise from the Ashes. I think the investigation segments with Meekins are perhaps most interesting. You get to see his overall very sort of manic behavior. He goes from really high highs to low lows really fast.
You're right. That's a good point.
Yeah, and his animations reflect that.
What I find funny about this guy is that he's like an unstoppable force of stupid. Like, everything he touches is just ruined. Think about the way Edgeworth gets screwed over by him with that. Here's evidence from the chief. He's like, does this have to do with the case? Nope. And it's like, then get it out of my office. But then it turns out it's super important, just not in the way Edgeworth thought it was.
Right.
So, Meekins is just everything he does just boils down to ruination.
It's absolutely true. It's also true for Meekins in his Apollo Justice. I mean, that was the biggest screw up of like the entire franchise.
Yeah, thought that piece of plywood was Zach Ramoray. So,
and letting him escape caused the dark age of the law.
And I gotta say, there's one thing I've always thought of is that since he was the bailiff around the time of Phoenix's last trial, in my headcanon, he's always the guy slip and go to the coffee. He's the one.
That's fair to say.
Now, one line from him that's always stuck out to me from PW. This is just a quick tangent. It's just one of the funniest lines in the game that's always just stuck out to me. It was just when Meekins talks about a relatable experience anybody can understand. Opening your car door and going flying several feet into the concrete.
Yeah. Yep.
Everyone experiences that.
Everybody. Yep. I guess another thing, just to quickly add for Mike Meekins, that I just really like is, I understand it can get annoying because it's very prevalent, but I really, really like the megaphone gimmick.
Yeah.
The sound effect is ear piercing, and that's obviously annoying, but that's the point. But really, I just think there's something really funny about, Phoenix Wright is just standing like 3 feet away from him, and he just picks up the megaphone, just shouts it in his face. The technical limitation doesn't show that, but that's what's happening. Think about it. He's literally just shouting in his face with a megaphone. Straight face.
You and I have always had a lessened bar for what annoys us in an Ace Attorney character, because I realize a lot of people have like a long list of Ace Attorney characters they can't stand because they're so annoying, but it's like I really don't, other than like Juniper, I guess. So my list is, I don't really hate that many characters. So
yeah, I mean, outside of Dual Destinies, I have never had an experience where I was really like annoyed with a character or anything,
right?
Or a gimmick. Yeah, so I'm like you in that way. With that said, Jay, let's hear your pick for Justice for All.
Controversially, I've always thought Case 3 was freaking hilarious. Until, of course, it gets more depressing, and then it gets very interesting. But my pick for my favorite side character from JFA is Ben Woodman. And what's the doll's name again?
Trillo.
Yeah. So what I've always just found that like the ventriloquism routine in this game to just be funny, if only because of the animation of Trilo punching Woodman in the face. Like that animation has just always done it for me, because like he's controlling that puppet to punch him in the face. Like,
right?
Why?
Especially
do
when
that?
you realize that it's really funny.
It's. I also love the animation of him flying and tearing apart, and then he's back together in a few seconds. But like, especially in reaction to the judge saying, "But you're a puppet, you can't marry a woman," and it all just flies apart. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah, it's great. That's that that odd sort of Japanese humor showing through.
Yeah, and then you have no problem like still listening to the testimony of him standing outside in the cold and seeing the silhouette go by him. Like, it just, of course, our opinion on Case 3 is much different than the standard what most people have to say about it, but still, I gotta say, I think the case is very funny in its side characters, but this one just happens to stand out for me the best. I was considering Mo the Clown, but I did not pick him. So what do you think about Woodman?
But I did not pick him. Well, I agree with you. Case 3, Turnabout Big Top, has a lot of really funny characters. And I think Mo's pretty funny. I think Regina's pretty funny. And the thing is, it's all unintentional, except for Ben Woodman, because he's actually kind of playing a character. But it's actually hard to realize, because when Ben talks himself, he really struggles. I didn't mention this in 3A number 2, but something I thought about when writing about his character in that review was that I always got the impression that Ben Woodman actually was uncomfortable with like himself, and like he actually couldn't talk well without stuttering. But somehow putting on that mask and playing that character,
right,
it comes out, which is sort of like a little like sweet twist to this otherwise just genuinely funny slapstick-full character.
That's how Spider-Man works. I mean, he's not that jokey outside the costume just because he is just a naturally insecure kind of guy. But when he puts the costume on, he's really able to ham it up.
Absolutely.
Not that I'm saying his character, Ben Woodman's character, is anywhere near as good as Spider-Man, by the way.
Not nearly. Yeah. Right. Well, on that note, for my pick for Justice for All, I immediately thought about Turnabout Big Top, because that case just really pushes its minor characters. I was going to pick Ben Woodman, but I knew that you were. So instead, I looked to Case 2 and I want to talk about one of my all-time favorites, Dr. Turner Gray. I mean, you barely knew him in person, but he was just so funny. I'm always gripped into watching or replaying Case 2 because of that opening investigation with him. Mm-hmm. Because especially at the time when we were getting used to Ace Attorney's structure and what we could sort of expect from its cases, being only the second case of the second game, we already had someone... we actually are there to witness someone walk into Wright & Co. Law offices and request Phoenix's assistance. Now, it was not, wasn't in the traditional sense at first, because while he was going to him for help because his clinic was going through all that controversy and he wanted a quick way out of it, sort of like a dirty way out of it, of course, eventually what actually happens is he's just taking him, for the spirit channeling. They're just traveling over to Corrine Village. But... you have this doctor who seems like he knows what he's doing, but he's clearly malicious and clearly a bad person, frankly. But his mannerisms really make him something entertaining. I mean, nobody's glasses fall off that much, but but he has to keep pushing them back up. And you notice, Jay, the space where his glasses are when they're sitting up correctly is, severely wrinkled because he pushes so hard, up his nose. The detail is staggering. He's constantly yelling. His hand is twitching like it's some demonic, like Thanos something. I was gonna mention that the hand animation. Yeah, and then the one where he has his elbows up and he's leaning straight into you, and it's just weird animations, especially for what are essentially Game Boy Advance games. So yeah, I think you combine his mannerisms, his connection to the plot, and his kind of surprising death. I think Dr. Turner Gray, while by no means a good person, was certainly entertaining.
You've basically said everything I could say about him. Although I could, the one thing is you did mention, well, he's really like crazy, as you say, but I think he's one of the standout characters. And as far as that game is concerned, up to that point where it's like Phoenix's reaction to characters is really entertaining because Phoenix is just so normal by comparison. Case 3, of course, is a lot more where that came from, but still.
Yeah, I mean, unless you would count Richard Wellington, Turner Gray is really the first character in that game that's just such a contrast to Phoenix, yeah.
Right.
So anything else you'd like to add on Dr. Turner Gray?
I really don't, actually. You said just about everything I was going to, or could have said about him.
All right, then moving on to your pick for Trials and Tribulations.
This was also a difficult one because this game has a lot of good side characters. But I picked Victor Kudo from Case 3. Simply, not because he's a particularly deep or inspired character, but mostly because of the fact that Phoenix is getting injured by food, and I just find Phoenix getting hurt really funny because it's just Phoenix has to put up with so much abuse just because he needs to get to the bottom of it, and he has to take everything that comes his way. Which is a side note, which is why he's so entertaining in Apollo, because that he's finally saying all his inner monologue out loud because he has nothing else to lose. But anyway, I think Victor Kudo is like one of the main witnesses in Case 3, right? I'm trying to remember. So like his whole testimony, it was really bad and embarrassing, and then just the way he keeps trying to drag it out at the end, and then gives the apology letter, and Phoenix is like, wait, this isn't even an apology. So I find him pretty entertaining.
Well, on that note, I would say out of all the characters that really just make the trial completely dysfunctional, I think Victor Kudo was the most interesting. You have that quote-unquote apology letter, something we've never seen before or since. It's just, again, a recipe for Turnabout. It's full of hilarious moments. That's definitely one of them. I should have focused on that in number 3, because that's just such a funny moment. Of course, we can't forget with Victor Kudo his attraction to the waitresses.
Right.
Which
he should go to Super Babes instead.
Oh God, I think we should be glad he's not going to Super Babes. And then he's going to Tresbian instead, or Tresbine. But no, it revealed something interesting about him, I guess. But more importantly, again, that's a way that Kudo directly ties to the plot. And I like how one of the solutions Phoenix has is Maya channeling Mia, and then that getting him to open up. It's just really funny. I also would like to add that his sort of like war vet kind of attitude is really funny because he's so small and weak looking, his stature, and then of course he's throwing birdseeds at the player, which it's just throwing at Phoenix is I don't know what to say other than Shutakumi. How did you come up with that?
And side note, since we're talking about side characters in general, TNT was also a game where side characters they get their own theme a lot in that game, whereas in the previous games you'd get like the people themes, but now it's just like Victor Kudo has a theme, like Tigre and Atmi have themes, Lee Stoneham has a theme, etc.
Yeah, and that's really nice. That's a really good addition, and it definitely helps us remember the characters better for sure.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to add on Victor Kudo, but he's an excellent choice for TNT in a game that, as you said, already just has so many fantastic and interesting minor characters. So, with that said, my choice was Luke Atmi, being the villain of Case 2 and probably one of the most, probably the most prominent side character of that case. Luke Atmi, he's something else. As I kind of said in number 3, he really carries the case to new heights because, well, for one, he's very eccentric and very odd and strange. 2, he's got a striking design, as I used your quote in the video.
Yeah.
It's truly striking design. This sort of like black tie outfit. He's got the cummerbund, but then the weird lightning on his, really short hair and that monocle and
like
the
rat-like smile he's got. Well, actually, now that I mention I say he's got a rat-like smile. The character art of him is him inspecting a rat.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Him sort of making his own persona to fight is really creative. I've never heard or seen anything like that anywhere before.
Yeah. Yeah. Very satisfying character to take down in the end of the case. Especially because of the fact that the case is like two halves of it. Like there's the grand larceny side, and then there's the murder part of it. And the way he breaks down the first time is fake, trying to get exposed, try to get arrested for the thefts as opposed to the murder, and then the way he breaks down the real time, it's interesting, especially since he is crazy and wacky, but he's also really smart now that I think about it, because his double jeopardy scheme is really interesting.
Yes, his plan was fantastic, and he got really far into executing it too.
Yeah, and he got really close to almost getting away with it when he was actually brought to the stand for murder anyway, because it was just, you had one chance, you only can press one sentence, and it was just this fatal screw up that really got him, and it's a really interesting, I think it was to piggyback off something you were saying on that last Turnabout podcast, or it was just talking about how, the Case 2 PW killer is not congruent with the game's difficulty, but I was just saying, it's like, if it's for this game, even though it's a second case, that contradiction at the end is hard to spot, but it makes so much sense how anyone could screw up like that.
Well said. Absolutely. So with that said, we are going to say goodbye to the good old Phoenix Wright trilogy, and I'd like to hear your choice for Apollo Justice Ace Attorney.
This was another hard one, because this game does have a lot of memorable characters. But I picked one. My pick was Guy Eldoon from Case 2. And when thinking of reasons why that was, for one thing, of course, is somebody who we have to help, of course. But he is somebody I find interesting because of the fact that he isn't a character we've known for very long when we meet him, although he already knows Phoenix and Trucy and mentions Maya without mentioning her. But, it just feels like you already know him, and there's familiarity with this guy. You get to just know him really fast and be somebody you want to talk to and think is a giver of useful information in a relatively short amount of screen time. And in Apollo, where everyone is useless in your investigations, it stands out.
Yeah, not only that, but Guy Eldoon adds just a lot of layers to the dilemma in Case 2. There's a whole lot of factions in Case 2 when you think about it. You have Guy Eldoon just fending for himself with his own little business. You have the Right and Anything Agency at this point, which is sort of like our home base. I don't really consider Hickfield Clinic as a part of this. That's really on its own. But you've got Pal Maractus's clinic, and then you've got the Kataki. So it's like these four, mostly three if we throw out Right Anything Agency, sort of factions, groups of people, they're all tangled into this really strange murder, but they're also very separate, and they have their own opinions of each other, which really contributes to the Turnabout Corner's feel of just being a little small neighborhood. I mean, really, as you and I have talked about before privately, when you look at the map, this all takes place on just one block. It really is. Yeah. And with one corner of the block being crucial to the case. It's a really interesting premise. I wish other people would sort of see that, but...
Yeah. The way Case 2 comes together is really fascinating.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And Guy Eldoon, oh man, he's so entertaining. Not only, of course, is he connected to all of these interesting aspects of Case 2, but I really like the reveal of his serious side when he brings up his backstory, and how we see him physically remove the sort of mask he has on, because, of course, Guy Eldoon has that, that metaphorical mask, but he literally does take off his hat with, the noodle hair, and he looks at you with this very sincere expression, which is credit to the artists, and that really changes everything. After that, he's still the fun Eldoon that we knew, who's playing his harmonica and enjoying his extremely salty noodles. But, he's a very sincere man, and he's just a character that I'm always rooting for. I would hope his business does well, and, that he can get past his grief.
Yes.
So, excellent choice, Jay. My choice for Apollo, and this was really hard, really, really difficult, but I almost went with Maki, and I consider Thalassa Lemire to be a main character, so I couldn't pick her. I ended up going with Vera Misham, the defendant of Case 4. So we see Vera at 2 different ages. We see her when she's very young and when she's older as sort of like a teenager. I'll have to check the years for the review, of course, to be sure.
I think she's 19 in the present and 12 in the past, from my last recollection. But
okay,
yeah, you'll have to double check.
Thank you. Recollection, but okay, no. This is why the podcast ended. No. So, there's a clear difference, and I think both are interesting. So when she's younger, she's extremely reserved, extremely quiet, likes cute things, likes trope grammarly, enjoys, the magic shows. So we get a feel for her sort of like childlike innocence. And when she's older, she's not much more open or, expressive. That's not what I'm trying to say, but there's definitely more communication there and sort of more coldness because of what's happened to the Mishams in between that time span, as we see throughout the Mason system. I think Vera is a character that could have so easily been downright weak. This sort of archetype of a quiet, reserved character who doesn't say much of anything can be really boring and not narratively satisfying in any way. But I found Vera to be so mysterious, and because she's tied to some of the really dark things that Christoph Gavin has done, makes her what could have been such a stock character into something really, really interesting. So what are your thoughts on Vera Misham?
Well, firstly, you said she could have been a weak character, but IKG, she is a weak character because every defendant in the game is not helping you, which means that it must have been an accident and the writers weren't intending it and the game sucks.
Nice try, commenter.
Anyway, I basically agree with all of what you had to say, and I find the fact is that you will actually be tired of it by the time you get to the meeting her, because we've gone from defendants getting less and less useful to the previous case where the defendant couldn't speak English, but now it's that the defendant just literally doesn't speak to you at all. So you're just like, oh my goodness, another one of these. Like, what's going on here? Does everyone out to get me? But it's just that much you would be tired of it. But again, the more the tragedy unfolds before your eyes, and you're just like, wow, this is a really dark case, and that's just really, she acts like that for a reason, and you feel bad for it, even if your probably initial impression would be to think, oh, this is ridiculous. So, beyond that, yeah, I don't really have too much to add, but that's one of the things that stands out to me is the first impression.
Yes, and that's certainly important when talking about Vera Misham, for sure. Yeah, just such a interesting character. I don't think we'll ever get a character like her again. I think she's definitely a one and done, so I'm glad that they, pardon the pun, but did her justice. Mm-hmm. So, with that said, moving on to Ace Attorney Investigations.
I had figured you'd probably be doing more of the talking for this one, because this game isn't really my forte, but my pick for this game would be Lauren Pops from Case 3. At least I think that's how you pronounce the last name.
Lauren Pops, yes.
I picked her because the way she's off-center and to the negative zone of the screen has always just been entertaining to me. I just, that in particular, that's just the one thing that really sticks out is just that aspect of it, because I don't think that's been done in the series before.
Mm-hmm. I think, well, her design with her outfit fits into the sector that she is currently, really resides in when she's working at the park,
right.
The attraction. I think it's interesting how she has this ring pop, as I call it. I mean, I know that's the candy version. I don't know what they call it in the game, but it's basically a ring pop, and she will just lick it for no reason. I think if I'm to understand Yamazaki, I think the reason she has that is to show like some sort of like innocence, I guess. Like, oh, look at me, I'm just eating my candy, kind of thing. But then she is also sort of manic in a way where she will take her hair and has an animation where she's like threatening to like cut it with scissors. It's really strange.
In
I don't know.
response, you get Edgeworth's default sprite.
Yes, very humorous. Yes, I love that. Well, anything with the default investigations Miles sprite is hilarious. But yeah, so Lauren Pops has got some really interesting animations going on. What do you think about her in terms of her role in the whole kidnapping scheme?
I don't remember it, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm another one of those guests. I guess I remember that. I feel like it's been like a running theme whenever you ask someone in investigations one question.
That's okay. It's okay. Well, I don't have too much to say anyway, because I don't want to just summarize it, but I'll just say that I thought her involvement was sort of surprising in a way, because while I suspected her, because she's just, with her sort of outbursts, she's just really not trustworthy, especially if you've been playing all the Ace Attorney games up until this point. Miles certainly doesn't trust her. I don't think Gumshoe does either, if he's been paying attention to her specifically, but Kay doesn't either. And, it's interesting how she was okay with staging this, but then there's that tragedy of when they find out who died. Deacon, was related, and that just sucks. I mean, that's just horrible. So, that definitely takes the character, into a direction of more depth. But yeah, Lauren Pops, I think she's just supposed to make the player kind of uncomfortable, and you're not really supposed to side with her. You're not really supposed to, like, target her, because she's also not the true perpetrator of the case. But, again, kind of like Vera Misham, just a very interesting character that we've never seen before or since. I think that's the best I could say about Lauren Pops.
One question, though. You said you don't want to summarize the case, but, I mean, do you want to dive into the screenwriting?
I'm so tempted to name drop somebody.
But you probably shouldn't. So, yeah.
Exactly. I will not dive into the screenplay, Jay.
Screenwriting. The screenwriting. That's a thing.
Yes. Yes. That's right. Well, my choice for Investigations 1 is one of my favorite characters in the entire franchise, whether people understand it or not. I've gotten both responses. Rhoda Tannero, from one of my favorite cases that nobody cares about, Turnabout Airlines. Jiffy, if you're listening, this one's for you, a fellow fan of Turnabout Airlines. I adore this case. I adore every minute of it. And Rhoda Tannero is a character whose fault is being normal.
Right, that very stand out in that way.
Very stand out. It's surprising to me that people find her forgettable. Rhoda Tannero's got this very strange haircut, I'll give you that. But I wouldn't categorize her family issues at home as anything strange. I think that's perfectly relatable to many people out there. So, really, there's nothing strange about Rhoda Tannero at all. She arrests Miles Edgeworth for valid reasons, even though she was a little naive. But she does have reason to do so. She has reasons to be loyal to her captain. She had reasons to disobey her captain. She had reasons to dislike her co-worker, Cammy Meal. And she had lots of reasons to help Miles Edgeworth while also placing restrictions on him. She was completely fair. And that's what I thought was extremely likable about her. She also literally became a partner. If you're playing the DS version, she's on the partner on the screen. So if you need that sort of tutorial, you go to her. Kay hasn't been introduced yet, and Gumshoe's not on this plane, so... and Francisca isn't either, so... Or not yet. I just thought that Rhoda Tannero was just so helpful. The fact that she was mostly normal made her stand out in a series of just oddball characters, and I thought she was really pleasant and really nice, and yeah, that's why I'm such a fan of Rhoda Tannaro. In fact, I would outright say, out of everyone in this entire video, she's probably my favorite character that we were going to discuss.
I remember when I first played the game and you asked me if I got what her name was supposed to be. I'll say the reason why is that when I first read her name, it reminded me of the Crash 1 level titled Road to Nowhere, and I was like, oh, that kind of sounds like that, so I made the connection. But beyond that, though, I agree with everything you said, but I'm just going to latch on to one thing you pointed out about how Kay hasn't been introduced yet, and it's the second case. This is about Investigations 1 in general. It's kind of surprising that the game structure seems like it's messier than it is. It comes together really well in the end, especially with all the revelations in Case 5. But, like, when you think about it, like, the assistant isn't introduced till the third case. You only, like, you see her in Case 3 and 5. Like, the rival is not introduced till the third case and only gets, like, 2 big cases of screen time. And then there's all other characters like Francisca and Gumshoe to talk to and worry about, work with. So it's amazing how there's a big lot of characters in Investigations 1, so it's amazing that the game comes together and makes as much sense as it does.
I would have to agree. I never thought about that, but I guess just to reword what you said, to give some input, on paper, the structure of the game does look really messy. And yeah, airlines would certainly kind of, I guess, be a red flag for that, right? Because you don't have Lang, your rival character, or your assistant Kay yet. Although, actually, we saw in beta versions of Investigations, I don't know if you know this or not, but Kay Faraday was planned to be introduced in Turnabout Airlines.
Right, I think I've seen those screenshots, yeah.
Okay. For whatever reason, she wasn't. Maybe there's information on that, maybe there isn't, but...
So credit to the game. Lang makes a pretty good impression, and so does Kay, even though they only have 2 cases of screen time out of 5. So, yeah.
All right, with that said, your pick for Investigations 2.
This game has a lot of main characters in it, so it was difficult to think of like the best minor character, but I settled on Nicole Swift because I actually recently replayed Turnabout Target a few weeks ago. What I like about this character is that she's like a protege of Lotta Hart, but I think she's more entertaining and more tolerable than Lotta, because I think Lotta... she's got her ups and downs. I like her sometimes. Other times I don't. Just a quick tangent about her. I remember in one of my favorite Lotta moments was in Turnabout Goodbyes when Manfred's like, "Yes, Mr. Wright, you proved that the witness is an idiot who believes in monsters. Now what?" But anyway, like Nicole, I like her design more. She's just like, I think it's just again a PW versus Investigations 2 thing. It's just the design is way more detailed with a bunch of references to a lot of stuff in the series on her jacket. And the way her role in the first case especially is just really interesting, as like she's the first, I believe she's the first logic chess sequence, so memorable in that sense.
That's correct.
And yeah, her upstart attitude, wanting to get an interview with Edgeworth, is pretty entertaining.
As of this recording, Investigations 2 is one of the Ace Attorney games that I remember the least about. Just because of my not having re-experienced it since the first time, and also having to watch the second half due to a lack of resources to really play Investigations 2 well back then. Although this obviously doesn't pertain to Nicole Swift much, because she was prominent in Turnabout Target, as you said. So take what I say with a grain of salt, with that disclaimer said, but Nicole Swift really didn't make much of an impression on me at all. I thought it was interesting how she is sort of a protege to Lotta Hart rather than just simply bringing her back, although they do that anyway. Yeah. So that was interesting. It's like, oh, okay, that's a way to, expand this universe. That's cool. And, she was entertaining. Like, remember the logic chess segment was really fun. But yeah, honestly, there's not much I can say. I agree with what you said, but I'd have to sort of reevaluate the game to see how I would feel about Nicole Swift in a more modern context.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
So yeah, for me, with Investigations 2, I honestly couldn't choose between these two, because when I think of one of these characters, I often think of the other. So I wrote down Jeff Masters and Catherine Hall from Case 3.
I was gonna, before you say anything, I was like, speaking of Case 3, another person I was considering was Isaac Dover, just for the effect on the series alone, and just the impression he leaves in the few scenes he gets. So that's what when I was thinking of, so on the subject of Case 3, before you continue.
Well, I totally respect that. I totally see that. Regarding Jeff and Catherine, I thought that they were just extremely likable, for one thing.
Very much so.
They're both also very tragic characters who started out having a very positive and optimistic outlook on life and what they did. They loved what they did. You can tell by the case intro alone. But, tragedy strikes. And
one of lives are completely ruined. And one of the saddest demonstrations in the series, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Sort of focusing on one at a time, starting with Jeff. Jeff Masters had this really interesting charisma where he's sort of like, he's humble, but especially if we think about the past sections with Greg and Ray talking to him, he's very humble, but he also has this really interesting sense of humor. So all around, just like a really likable guy. And then you have Catherine, who's really sweet and nice, and was easily flattered. Just again, really likable. They both also were like really well dressed. They were always putting on a smile. Just the two characters that you just really hoped wouldn't go through IS7, but they did.
And even when he's in prison for years, he's still just such a nice guy who he cooks for everybody. No complaints had, and it's just, it's devastating what happened there. And then the ending of Case 3 is just one of the most tear-jerking endings in any case in the series.
Yes. One moment I always remember and associate with Jeff was the whole thing was, should we give him chocolate? He's in the detention center, and I thought that was just such a that was almost a tear-jerking moment, and a tear-jerker in itself, just because it's such a sweet detail. The ending of the case as a whole, I agree. I still remember a lot of that to this day, despite it being Investigations 2 and me. So I know I'm kind of cheating here, but I had to mention both characters because they're strongest together. Yeah.
Well, if I were to cheat in Investigations 2, my favorite side character in the game is Tyrell Bad. In Case 3, he's freaking incredible.
And it's his only case in the game.
Yeah. And he has nothing to do with the story of the game. Like, that's what I think is just so great about it, is that he's a character who was around at the time, so therefore why not use him?
This is very technical, but when I think of Investigations 1, I say Tyrell Bad, main character. But it's hard to say that for Investigations 2. So, by all means.
That's one thing I love about that game, is just how no thing from the series' past is going to be wasted. Like, why make a new movie studio where we can just use the one that already exists?
And not for fan service reasons.
Right. And it expands the universe as opposed to just being a thing you remember from the past. But as like Tyrell Bad, this was IS7. That was just a case he worked when he was still a detective, and is separate from anything Yacht Grasu, and also separated from everything happening in this game. Yes.
And a detail I mentioned to you as soon as I heard that you were playing through Case 3. I really appreciate the fact that for his Sprite Mini and his portrait sprites that they removed the bullet holes, because the whole KG8 disasters hadn't happened yet. He didn't have those bullet holes yet, so they, did what was right and made sure to give him a clean coat. So that's also kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and also I believe, if I recall, his tie had bullet holes on him too, and they fixed those too. So yeah. So with that said, oh boy, you know what's next.
Yes.
I guess we can stall and talk about the crossover.
Yeah, PO versus AA.
Yeah, what was your pick, Jay?
This game is also interesting because there's there's so many witnesses in this game because of the mob cross-examination element that there's a lot of memorable faces to pick from. But my favorite pick was Jean Grail. That is
Jean Grail, yes.
Only gets I believe 2 or 3 chapters of screen time, but is basically a main character for those 3 chapters, but not a main character of the game's overall story. But
right.
just the impression that this character leaves in those moments of screen time was always interesting, because she's very mysterious when you think it's a boy who is just a servant to what was his name again? The guy she worked for.
Oh, that would be Isaac Newton.
Yeah, him. So he's very mysterious at that point, but it always feels like there's something off about him. But then you don't really know what it is until you get to the court segment and the Golden Court, which is a very popular court. If it comes to PL versus A, I think it's one of the few parts of the game everybody can agree that they liked.
Yeah, it seems so. Yeah.
So a very memorable character, really sad. Voice acting is really good for the few moments of voice acting that she gets. And there's something I was going to say about this character. Oh, right. I remember when talking about the backstory at one point, you see Phoenix does this sad pose, because we don't really usually see what he looks like when he's upset, because it's usually when he's around, it's from his perspective. But what I noticed about that is that it was his sad face pose from TNT's first case, and I was like, level 5, good attention to detail.
I know, right? It's unfortunate we can't count on Capcom for this,
right.
But yes.
I was like, that makes it canon that when Phoenix is upset, he has a hard time looking people in the eyes.
Which is, and that's such a cool detail. That's canon.
Yeah.
That's a thing. It's not something many will notice, but yeah. It's, level 5 is, Professor Layton the whole series was created as a thank you to Ace Attorney, so you bet that they played TNT. But that's getting a little off track, of course.
Yes,
but
it is.
With Jean Grail, Jean Grail is my true choice for this list as well. But because I knew Jay had selected Grail, I decided to offer a different one. But first, I would like to say that Jean Grail is tied to just some of the saddest I've ever felt playing a video game.
That letter read is just really...
The letter read, it's just heartbreaking. I agree with you that the little bit of voice acting we got was well done. I think the one thing that you didn't talk about that I would like to mention was the whole gender reveal. I think that was very well done, unlike another Ace Attorney game that has 2 Ds for its subtitle. You might know, wink, wink, which one. But I really, really thought that was well done, considering the whole thing that witches are female. And so you have to hide your identity, and it ties well to her backstory. So it was actually a worthwhile reveal. And you have, the excellent voice acting moment with Zacharias Barnum grilling her, and your gender. And then it's like, oh goodness, oh no, she has to say it, So they did such a great job with that overall. So
yeah.
With that said, to pick a more humorous choice, we don't learn his name until the second time you meet him, Emir Paunchbag. This guy is something else.
Right.
Well, first of all, I would like to mention that he drank poison and survived.
Yep.
Just 'cause.
Sheer determination to be a thorn in everyone's side.
I don't even know what to say.
I'll mention that, again, when it comes to funny witnesses, this game has a lot where that came from. So him standing out is a compliment to that. What was it? I like the fact that Phoenix finds out there's somebody who is at the Newton's place, but before Phoenix knows who it was, he's like, "We need to do this witness now." And then Barnum's like, "No, we really don't. We really do not." And he's like, "Well, Your Honor, we have to have him." And then we say, "Okay, fine. You're gonna regret it." And then we find out it's him. He's like, "Oh, it's him."
They're like, "Oh, I do regret this." Yeah. Poor Phoenix. It's like, darn it. They must have seen it coming.
Yeah, that's a really good moment.
I like that
also like the
shot
part-
in Case 2 and Case 3 where it just shoots up to the balcony and he's just standing there by himself.
Right. That's some PO versus AA cinematics that just doesn't exist in any of the other games. Spirit of Justice does some stuff, but again, PO
It
versus AA
does.
has
I'm
it
sure
where
the
it counts.
DGS games do as well, but of course we can't say it from personal experience. But
Right.
I like how it's a canon fact that Amir Ponchbag just stands in his own section on the rail, and if he's ready to just interject, he has the gall to do it. In a witch trial with all of these people shouting at Phoenix, shouting at Barnum, won't shut up. The judge is constantly pissed off at the crowd. You got the whole mob mentality, and this guy has the nerve to solo walk up and just start talking, drinking alcohol in the courtroom, and then he drinks poison and lives.
I really like the part where he's told that he drank poison. It's just slow silence, and then it just like it cuts immediately to his drinking animation.
Yeah. I don't know what else you can say. He's just entertainment in a nutshell. So, with that said, it's time to talk about...
One of the most obscure Ace Attorney playable characters. He's actually one of the main characters of the game. I mean, you'd think so, but he's playable for a majority of the game. I give you Psylocke Wrong from Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies.
Psylocke Wrong is Jay and my name for Phoenix in Dual Destinies. It is Phoenix. We're talking about like Phoenix Wright in Dual Destinies, except we call him a different name because he was so, how should I put this? Butchered.
Yeah.
Psylocke Wrong is my favorite character of Dual Destinies as well, because of how hilarious he is on truly like a Sly Cooper Thieves in Time kind of level.
I was gonna say, Justice League Season 1 Superman's looking pretty good right about now.
No, yeah, he looks like, I don't know, the best character just ever written at that point. Or must be stopped almost sounds like Shakespeare, like compared to what Phoenix says. Like,
Whew. Looks like the prosecution's just as unprepared as I am.
That's pathetic, Phoenix. That sounds like something you should be saying in an elementary school trial. Ah, goodness.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, viewers, but this whole session about Psylocke Wrong is just going to be roasting the character, because what else can we say? I mean, we don't have any actual
I haven't
picks
even
for Dual
played the
Destinies.
game. I've hardly played the game past like the half of the first case, so I mean, I had to. My pick is just a joke.
If you want a real answer, I'll give you Yuri Cosmos from Case 4.
Right.
But I'd
I was
rather
gonna say we don't even like Psylocke anyway. He's not even the favorite.
No. As great as Yuri is, I mean, Psylocke's wrong. I mean, he looked at Apollo, who looked like he was dead on the ground, and the photo made it look like he wrote Woods trying to frame the killer.
What on earth?
I can't believe this. I quit.
So shocking.
I've never seen this before. It's not like the Lost Turnabout happened.
I was literally playing that case, and I just when I stopped playing the game was when it just got so annoying. I was just like, it was the part in the lobby when after Apollo was found dead, but then Athena out of nowhere brings up the fact that she was reading an article on Bigfoot from like the tabloids, and then Phoenix says in his head, "Well, you're reading too many of those paparazzi magazines," and then nobody's really responding. But then Athena goes, "Yeah, it's a really interesting story you guys should read. I couldn't do it justice." And then Juniper's like, "Justice?" Question mark, and I'm just like, "Oh my goodness, come on, that's so like not good writing."
Not at all. Goodness gracious. Well, to actually give some commentary on Yuri Cosmos real quick, and then I'll get back to what you want to say. I think Yuri Cosmos is legitimately well written, for the most part, from what I remember. It has been a while. But Cosmos he's kind of like Damon Gant in terms of this sort of like having this sort of like ambition and this confidence in himself. But he is unique for how he is actually a bit of a screw-up. I mean, of course, Damon Gant literally screwed up in terms of like, how we caught him for his crimes and stuff. But I mean, like, Yuri Cosmos is more, he's not as detail oriented, and with his like important job at the space station and how like you figure out Apollo, and Phoenix somehow figure out that the entire space station was rotated a different way than everyone thought at the time was actually a legitimately interesting twist and contradiction that to end case 4 on, to tie into case 5, but how Cosmos it was his fault that caused that, and it leads to his breakdown. I can't help but mention his theme. It's very dramatic, over the top, sort of fitting that like, yes, I am a hero, like mentality that he has in his head, while Phoenix and company are like, who is this guy? This guy is clearly not what he thinks he is, kind of thing. So if I had to give some legitimate Dual Destinies positives, I would say Yuri Cosmos was definitely one of them. Otherwise, I would probably think a lot more negatively of Case 4 as a whole if it wasn't for him. So,
all right then.
Yeah.
And I did mention that I did not have a pick for Spirit of Justice. I don't have a Spirit of Justice pick. I actually really did. I could not think of one that really stood out to me. So if you have one, I'll let you take the reins.
Sure thing. After a lot of consideration, I decided to choose Soren Sprocket from Turnabout Time Traveler. Thank you. Again, sort of like Vera, is quite quiet. But I like how he has this sort of gimmick where he's writing in his note, he'll make it an airplane, takes a little while, but, and then he throws it to you. It's kind of funny because, he's keeping it completely straight-faced while he's just throwing you notes. Again, imagine how Phoenix and Maya feel.
I remember, unless you had something you want to finish a point, I was going to say something about the guy.
Oh, okay. I just want to quickly say, the whole twist regarding his memory and how he really needs that book. Again, it's somehow, for all of the games we've had in the series, for all the characters, that's a brand new, interesting idea that Yamazaki came up with. And I just think it's I know this sounds stock to say, but it took the character to new heights, gave him more depth, and overall it made Soren so, like, I felt so bad for him that's when I really wanted to see this wedding work out, which obviously works towards the game's favor because the ending cutscene is the actual wedding.
Right. So I was going to say was that I really like how, like, this character trope that's really like a nerdy, geeky, not powerful kind of guy. And even in the case, as you said, he's got, like, his own memory limitations. Really flawed human being, but he'll still be climbing the side of an aircraft while it's in the air to save his would-be wife. That's a really strong characterization.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. And, of course, the whole proposal, even though, they were going to get married, the whole proposal at the end of the court was really sweet, too. So he's got a sweet side, he's extremely brave, and like you said, it was on the side of the airplane. That was just ridiculous. Even Miles Edgeworth, with all of his career experience, refused to believe that. That's just how daring that was of an act.
That's as I said, good characterization. It's fantastical, but it makes you buy the relationship. It really does.
Absolutely. Well, we, minus the DGS games, of course, we rounded out the entire series with our favorite minor characters. So, are there any characters, Jay, that we did not talk about at all that you'd just like to throw your 2 cents in?
No, not really. No, I've talked about everybody I liked from every game, and I had mentioned Tangent for a couple of other ones, so that's really it for me.
Excellent. I would say the same for myself. So, So, Jay's Reviews, where can people find you?
At the Jay's Reviews YouTube channel, which, like I said, was once primarily focused on video games and will be soon, but lately has been exclusively focused on the DC Animated Universe retrospective, which, well, if you like 3A-esque content, I guess that's the closest comparison I can make. And
yeah, that's fair to say.
Another place you can find me is on the hilarious Jay's Extras YouTube page. where many a funny video we posted at the expense of Sly4 and or Game Dude.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll definitely have both those channels linked. Honestly, it feels a little weird that I'll have Jay's extras plugged, but hey, it's hilarious. By all means, please watch them. Personal recommendations would be Jay's reviews in 2017, Nintendo, and all of the Sonic Forces ones. Really funny.
The Saga and the
Saga.
Flash ones from Eclipsed.
Oh yes, and the Flash from Eclipse. You have to watch that. Credit to the DCAU right there.
Yeah. Top 5 funniest moments for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you again, Jay, for coming back on and helping me out here. And also, I hope you enjoyed being able to talk about the series on a platform once again.
That's why I guess it's like that's why I feel like I'd be the least offensive repeat guest, because it's like this was not a podcast I'd be able to do 2 years ago and 20 days ago. Right, exactly.
All right, well, with that said, once again, to everyone who's been listening to Turnabout Podcast, thank you so much. And in the next coming weeks, we'll be seeing the last couple episodes. So please stay tuned for that, and take care.
Have a good one.